Retro.
Yeah.
Electro. Tech.
Oh yeah.
Hey, turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro electro tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Well, hello there once again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electro Tech. And I'm back working on the Magnavox Imperial Micromatic. And I wanted to start, before I get everything cleaned, re-lubed, reassembled, and carry out the final testing, I actually wanted to start with the tonearm. Getting that all squared away, getting this new cartridge mounting to the original mounting plate. So what I need to do in order to do that is, why I want to get it out of the way and get everything set up with the tonearm first, is because it's not that it's difficult to do, but there's just a little bit more involved in getting everything aligned properly and the cartridge mounted to the mounting plate nice and straight and all that. And what I have to do is drill out these rivets here that hold this black clip that used to accommodate the original cartridge, and I'm not going to need it for this one here. If I flip this over here, let's see if I can stay in frame. Yes, if I flip this one over, you can see that it has its own little mounting clip attached to the cartridge, of course. It has a couple of openings here to accommodate a few screws, some mounting screws in other words. Okay, so once I drill out these rivets and remove this original cartridge clip, well, I'm going to be able to use the same holes with, again, this clip here. Okay, that's attached to the cartridge once again. So I'm going to take this plate over to the vise and just carefully drill out these rivets and pop this clip off, and then start the process of getting this cartridge mounted onto the plate. Probably while I'm at it, I don't know if you can see the detail, but this mounting plate here is a little bit grubby as far as it's got some rust on it, surface rust, so I'm going to buff it out and just kind of clean it up a little bit. Not that that's absolutely necessary, but while I'm over there I might as well do that. So let me go ahead and get to it. Okay, so over here at the vise, nothing groundbreaking going on. Just clamp the mounting plate in the vise nice and tight, of course without squashing it, and just drilled out the rivets, and the little black clip just pops right off, so nothing to it. Just be sure, to wear your safety goggles. And there you go. So now I'm just going to deburr the surface here, kind of grind off the little sharp areas, and then that's it. Okay, so here we are. Before I snap the cartridge onto the clip here on the mounting plate, I just wanted to show you how I mounted the clip. I don't want to bring it too close because it'll get all blurry and all that. But pretty straightforward. Like I said, after I drilled out the rivets and I used the same holes, and I essentially lined up the clip that the cartridge mounts to. I don't know if you can see that, but you see there's this V-notch on at least on this particular plate here, this metal plate. There's this little V-notch, and the top of that clip, I just aligned it right in the center of this V-notch to keep alignment. Okay, so that's one way that aided me to get this clip aligned on the plate, so that once I mount it to the head shell, everything is nice and straight. Okay, so anyways, And then all you do really, you could probably see if I hold it sideways, you can see the tabs here. So this one has a, if I angle it, you can see that it has a slot, okay, an open slot there. And the back of the cartridge has a tab that drops in this slot, and then when you push the cartridge down, it'll clip in place via this clip section here. But you got to be really careful. It has a little area that you can kind of grab and bend it with your finger to help drop it in. You don't want to pop it in because this plastic is pretty thin actually. If you do that too hard, you got to be careful. I would just kind of bend this back a little bit carefully and then snap the cartridge in. So that's how I typically do it on these when I'm doing these conversions and mounting these aftermarket cartridges to this plate and whatnot. So anyways, just a little pointer there. And then this is how it looks mounted to the plate. Okay. And you know what? I figure that I will go over one more thing. So now that the cartridge is mounted to the plate, the stylus, of course, is attached to the cartridge. Okay, that's the way it arrived. So since I'm going to be doing work in mounting this plate and cartridge back to the head shell and all that, obviously I want to be careful with the stylus. I don't want to damage it. So one of two things you can do while you're working around the cartridge and mounting it and getting the wiring attached and just doing all that stuff you're going to be doing, and then mounting the tone arm back in place in the end. Well, either you need to pull the stylus. Now on this cartridge, it's a little bit hard to pull it out because it has this piece of spring metal that holds it down in place real good. Now, of course, it's not a big deal because it's obviously made to remove so that you can replace the stylus, of course. But the way you do that, let me make sure I'm in frame. Let me get over here. This is one of those, flippable styluses here. But anyways, I just bring this tab over that you flip kind of to the center and hold it pretty good, and then just pull out the stylus, okay? And same thing when you're inserting it back in. Just get it under that clip and it'll drop down in place, and there you go, you're in business. So you can either pull the stylus out if you're going to be working around it so you don't damage the stylus, or it's a little bit more clunky, but they send these cartridges with these guards, and these guards ain't really all that fantastic to speak of, because the guard doesn't really clip in place. It just kind of fits on like so, okay, kind of at an angle like that. It's pretty evident once you look at it how it mounts in place to protect your stylus. So anyways, nothing real. Let me get a little bit more light over here. I guess that works. Okay, so nothing real groundbreaking, but what you can do though, because this will just come off, it'll pop off. There's a little bit of tension that holds it on, but if you're working around it, you can knock it off and damage the stylus. But what you can do is just get a piece of Scotch tape or something and just wrap a piece of Scotch tape around, onto the plate, just around like that, just to hold this in place securely. You can do that if you don't want to pull the stylus out for whatever reason. And there you go. So just a couple pointers. And also too, being that this video is going to the owner of the unit that I'm restoring, I just want him to be familiar with this guard and all that, and also pulling out the stylus, how to do that. And like I said, when you pull out the stylus, it is hard because it's being held in there really tight by that piece of spring metal here. But it is meant to, come in and out, of course, but you just have to put a little oomph behind it and just lift it straight out. Okay, so here's the tone arm completed. I decided to run new tone arm wiring. So yeah, here's a look at it. You can see the new cartridge and all that stuff, the wiring exiting out the back, of course. So let me go ahead and actually zoom in a little bit. All right, so here's a closer look at the head shell area, new cartridge, and I'll just kind of pan along. You can see how I kind of routed the wire there and coming out the grommet there. So there you go. Okay, so I got most of the parts in here just soaking a little bit in a degreaser. Actually, I'm using Simple Green. It's a good degreaser, and I have it at about half strength, right about there. And yeah, it'll break up everything as far as the old grime and grease and whatnot. And then once it's soaked for a while, I'll move it over to another tray and wipe it down, get all the residual stuff off and get everything dried up. And once I do that, then I'll move into reapplying lubricant. So on that note, as I move along and start reassembly, that's when I'm going to start applying the different lubricants. As needed, where needed, as I always say. So where there needs to be some application of grease, then I'll touch on that, especially the more critical areas in terms of function, and where some areas will benefit from a little dab of oil. I'll show some of that, but I'm not going to get into a lot of detail right now at this moment. I'll touch on things as I move along. So for now, what I want to do is go ahead and just let this soak once again, get these things cleaned off, dried off, and then start that process. So let me go ahead and move into that, and I'll be right back. All right, so all of these parts here in this pretty little pink tray that matches your underwear, you know who you are. Anyways, all these parts have been cleaned, hand cleaned. You know, again, after I had them sitting in the degreaser there in the other tray, you know, I got a rag and cleaned them by hand. A few little brushes, cleaned them up by hand. A little bit more, made sure I cleaned out all of the various hubs. You know, the hubs that the various shafts extend through and all that. All the hubs and tubes and all that with you know, swabs and cleaner. Everything is absolutely clean. It's of course dry. Everything's been sitting in this tray, ready to reassemble and of course re-lubricate along the way. One thing I want to mention is that as I start zooming in on some of the parts, you'll notice that there is discoloration on the metal surfaces, okay? I'm bringing that up because I cleaned everything thoroughly. I don't want anyone to say, well, what are those dark patches or dark spots? He must have left, you know, old residual grease or whatever. He didn't clean it good. No, that's just discoloration of the metal. You know, I didn't go through and, you know, with abrasives and you know, remove discoloration and, you know, buff and polish each metal piece by hand. I didn't do that. So anyways, but everything is thoroughly clean, and there you go. Same with over here. I removed this entire control assembly, including the idler assembly. All the levers were individually cleaned by hand and, you know, re-greased and all that. So everything is really nice under here. The only thing I have left to do is service the motor. So I want to get the main mechanism reassembled first, re-lubed, reassembled, and then before I put the mechanism back in, of course, you know, I'm going to just pop the motor out, do some servicing on it. I'll probably cover some of that as well. But otherwise, yeah, everything is pretty much ready to roll, and that's it. So anyways, let me go ahead and get to it. Okay, so I'm going to get started with getting the intermediate gear assembly, or, you know, drive wheel assembly, intermediate gear assembly situated here. So the importance of the intermediate drive gear, the intermediate gear assembly, is that when activated, this is the gear that moves into position to start rotating. Let me get the glare off of there. Start rotating the main cam gear and cycle the tone arm, okay? So obviously it's a crucial piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this drive carrier, okay? Make sure I'm in frame. All right, this drive carrier here, I'm going to put a very light film of some white lithium grease before I drop it down into the hub, okay? So let me go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to put a little bit of white lithium grease on my brush here, just a little bit, because like I said, I'm just going to put a light film on that shaft, okay? So let me go ahead and do that, just a light. By the time I spread it out, And you know, pardon the exposure, it's probably going to be up and down because of the, you know, the glare coming off of some of these metal parts. So it is what it is, you know. So there you go. All right. So what I need to do here is get the shaft of this carrier piece here down through the hub here, and of course I'm going to set my intermediate gear in here. But once I dry this down, then that's all well and good. But before I do that, there's a little spring. Let me get this situated. There's a little tension spring here that I need to hook underneath here. Let me point out this area right here. So there's a little notch. There's this track here, but there's a little notch at the end, if you will. And this spring, it might be hard to see it. I don't know. I'm kind of looking at the screen. I have the screen flipped around, and I think you can kind of see it. But there's a little hook on this spring nonetheless that I need to bring up under this plate and hook it right into that little slot there. And then it just kind of wraps around this hub that the shaft of the carrier piece is going to drop down into. And then I need to bring it over the top here. Let me see if it'll just kind of stay there and rest there. Yeah, pretty much. So let me go ahead and drop this wheel in place. All right, that's looking pretty good. And then let me bring this carrier down through it without that spring popping loose. Where am I? Okay, right there. All right. And there we go. Now, before I run the shaft through here, let me make sure the spring is sitting behind it. Okay, let me pull this up a little bit and swing it into place. And there we go. Cool. All right. So again, you know, like I said, that little tension spring just wraps around. You can see it. I think you can see it here behind the shaft that drops down into this drive release lever here. Okay, so hopefully that's pretty clear. But again, this video is not really about going through the entire reassembly process. I'm just pointing out, you know, how I'm kind of going through and re-lubing stuff. So I re-lubricated that main shaft there of the carrier piece here. You know, a drive gear, drive wheel, carrier that drops down through this hub. So I just put a light smear of grease, and that's about it. The next thing I'm going to install up under here is this pinion gear. All right. And this pinion gear, same thing, I'm just going to put a light little smear of grease. In fact, let me just do that real quick. That's all I want. Because again, I don't want to really get things too bogged down with grease, because eventually, you know, when this grease starts to age, and I talk about this all the time, it will degrade a bit. It has a tendency to kind of thicken up a little bit. And that's why, you know, again, this gear needs to be maintained every now and then. You know, you have to have somebody go through or you need to do it. You have to go through and check these different aspects of the mechanism and make sure everything is looking good and all that stuff. So there you go. So I'm just going to end up shoving this this little pinion gear up in here and then get it secured on the top side. So there's a spring here that I'm going to drop over the hub that I just fed the pinion gear shaft through, and then there's a washer over top and a clip. That's about it. So let me go ahead and get this all situated. Let me pull this down. And there's two, let me see. There's two little notches in the shaft. The clip goes on the very bottom slot or notch, whatever. Okay, let me see if I can do this without it flying across the room. That is, snap the circlip back in. Yeah, so there it is. Okay, right on. And then all I have to do is on the bottom side here, and I'm trying to position this so it doesn't cause a lot of glare and drop the exposure down. You see the threaded shaft, okay? So I'm just going to put this washer up on here, and then tighten this nut down. Now this nut here, you don't tighten it real tight, or else you're going to inhibit the movement of the intermediate gear. Okay, it's not really meant to go on real super tight. Okay, just when you tighten it up, when you get it to the end here up against the hub, you just barely tighten it up. Okay, you don't want to cinch down on it too hard. Actually, let me just go ahead and demonstrate real quick with this nut driver how I'm tightening up this nut, because it is important that you don't over tighten it. And I like to put just a little drop of oil on the threads. All right, so that's what I did. I want this nut to turn just real nice. And when I feel I've gotten to the bottom here, up against the hub, then that's it. I'm just reaching the bottom of the hub, it stops, and then I'm not going to tighten it beyond that, okay? And you want to be sure that this gear is turning nice and free. And actually, I need to back it off a little bit. I can tell it's a little tight. So just back it off just a hair. And there you go. Now it's moving nice and free. You see, if I tighten it up too much, let me do it again. Let me give it a twist. See how tight that gear is now? So you just back it off just a hair. Just a hair. And you'll know when it's right, okay? But that's an important point. Something that you probably figure out on your own if you were doing one of these. But there it is. And that's where I want it. I could even back it off just a hair, like that. And that's what I want. All right. Another thing I may have forgot to mention in this video, I know I talked about it in the first one, is the red intermediate gear versus the green intermediate gear. You might have saw them sitting in the tray just a moment ago. And those of you that understand these micromatic mechanisms know that, well, only one intermediate gear is required. So you might have been wondering, well, why does he have two intermediate gears sitting there? Well, it's because the green one here, the original one, has a couple of teeth that are damaged, okay? Just slightly. They're part of the teeth there, the two teeth, the tops of them they either got busted off or they just worn down. I think they were damaged, but anyways, neither here nor there as far as that goes. But this gear is still functional. I demonstrated in the first video that the unit is cycling. Now, every once in a while, when I was testing the cycling aspect of this unit, which I didn't show all of it on camera, there was a few times that, the tone arm got a little hung up and whatnot, but that had nothing to do with the intermediate gear. So the intermediate gear is not slipping or anything like that. It doesn't have so much damage to the teeth or so much wear and broken teeth that it's slipping. It's definitely working fine. Most of the teeth are just fine, other than a couple that are side by side that are kind of damaged. But other than that, it's doing okay. So if I had to use this intermediate gear in a pinch, well, I'm keeping it because it's a good gear still. But because I have some other parts units and all that stuff, I had this this extra intermediate gear that has perfect teeth all the way through. So since I'm doing a a full mechanical restoration for the customer. I wanted to make sure he had a, you know, a perfect gear, in other words, even though this one is functioning just fine. So I thought I'd add that in just in case some of you were wondering why there were two intermediate gears side by side in the parts tray. So that's all. Okay, so I want to move on and start getting some levers reinstalled here, starting with the striker feed lever, which, you know, you can see obviously the hole here right in the center at the pivot point, and then there's this little stub here, a little shaft, whatever you want to call it. So the striker feed lever just drops down on that, and there you go. Here's our pivot point. All right, good. And I talk about the function of the striker feed lever and this little striker arm, and how they're involved with operating the trip mechanism and starting the cycling process and all that, so I'm not going to get into that. What I do want to get into a little bit of detail about is actually because of another video that I made a while back where there might be a little controversy. And in retrospect, I should have gone back and maybe explained things a little bit with a follow-up video, but I didn't at the time. I didn't explain some circumstances that were involved in what I'm about to explain right now. And what I'm about to explain is this. So in that video, on this section of the plate here, at the rear of the striker feed lever, I actually applied a thin sheen of grease, white lithium grease, because white lithium grease is a fairly thin grease overall, okay, especially when it's applied in it, you know, with just a thin little sheen or a film. Of course, if you glob a big pile of it on and all that, well, okay, that's a different story. But I applied a little thin sheen to this section of the plate. And why did I do that? Because normally I don't. And I didn't explain that circumstance there. But, and the reason why I didn't get too worried about it is because if you do apply a thin sheen of grease in this area, it's not going to hurt anything. And I'll explain why that is. I'm going to clarify. So that's why I didn't feel the need after the fact, when I thought about it later, I didn't feel the need to immediately go in there, take down that video, re-edit it, or put it, you know, add a follow-up and explain it, because it's not anything that's going to cause a problem. Unless you were to squeeze a bunch of grease in this area, then maybe so. It might over time cause some problems. But just a thin sheen, and I explained that in that video, that just a little light amount, you don't want to overdo it, just a thin application will sometimes help aid the travel. And here's what I mean by sometimes. In that situation, and what I didn't explain was the section of the plate that I was working on, and I've seen this happen before. It depends if some of these plates kind of get rusted out a little bit, some surface rust, and you know, they'll actually get kind of pitted, and they get kind of a gritty feel to them. And yes, you could go in with some fine some fine sandpaper and all that, and smooth things out and polish it up and smooth it out again, but I didn't do that. So because sometimes these get a little bit pitted and gritty and all that, and that was the case in that video, is that there was a little bit of hindrance going on at the rear here of this striker feed lever. It was kind of rough, so that's why I smeared a thin sheen of grease and really didn't follow up and explain why. That's the point. But if somebody watches that video and they do that, they're not gonna harm the function of this, especially the striker feed lever in this rear section. And here's why. Because there's coming off the tone arm base, there's that tone arm position lever, okay, that follows the position of the tone arm on the top side, and there's that little pin that that guides, and I'm just going to use a screwdriver as an example. Just say that this is the pin on the lever that moves the striker feed lever along its pivot point, its path of travel here. Okay, so that's what's going on. Now that moves with enough, enough force to where even a little tiny smear of grease isn't going to inhibit the movement in this rear section of the striker feed lever, where I felt it's going to be a problem at all. And in fact, in some situations, it's a good thing that there's a little light smear of white lithium grease or something comparable to that in viscosity, and that will kind of smooth things out just enough so that this doesn't have a problem and it's not getting hung up on any rough patches on this piece of metal. So that's why I did it. That's what I want to explain. So moving on, if it's nice and smooth in this area, don't apply any grease. That's my point, okay? And definitely not to the striker arm, okay? Because the striker arm is just a very lightweight little lever, very lightweight, that needs to slide, okay? You see this portion here, the bottom side of this striker arm that has these two little pieces of nylon, little pieces of plastic. Well, they sit right here on this section of the striker feed lever, and they need to glide along under their own weight. You do not put any oil, any grease, because that's important that this thing moves kind of independent under its own weight as the striker feed lever is moving in toward the the inside of the spindle housing and all that stuff. And I explain why that is and how that works. I'm not going to do it here. Matter of fact, in the first video in this series, like I said, I explain in detail how that all works. In fact, I probably went on and on too long on that topic because, sometimes I do that. But anyways, guys, that's that. I just wanted to explain this section and the little smear of grease that I did in another video and why I did that. And normally you don't need to do it and all that. So there you go. So anyways, let me go ahead and move on. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do before, of course, reinstalling the striker arm is I'm going to reinstall the spindle housing or the spindle hub that you see here. So I just left the screws in place, as you can see, because I didn't want to lose them. So I'm just going to remove these. All right. And usually I don't like to film, this kind of stuff where I'm removing screws and all that because, I just like to kind of get to it. Because I talk enough as it is, right? So, anyways. But some of you, that are really seeking more detailed information and want better explanations, that's why I explain this stuff. That's why I kind of talk a lot on some of these topics, because I'm trying to get people to think and really understand the principle-based operations of things and kind of walk people through in that way, because sometimes people are looking for that kind of information. They want a detailed explanation. Okay, let me get this in place. Let me see here. All right. Okay, there we go. It was probably out of frame there, but I had to tweak around with this a little bit. Okay, so let me go ahead and get these screws in there and I will be right back. Okay, and actually before I put the striker arm back in place, well, I have it kind of out of the way. Not that it really gets in the way. Well, it kind of does. So anyways, this is where I'm going to apply a little thin film of white lithium grease, and this is where I really emphasize less is more, okay? Because depending on how much grease you apply, that can definitely make or break the whole lubrication process, believe it or not. Some people think, well, if I apply more, that's a good thing. No, it's not. And again, just a thin film, and notice when I pull back the drive release lever here, okay? All right. I'm pulling back this little shaft here that the striker arm attaches to. This is where the striker arm, the rear of the striker arm attaches right here. Now this little area in here, let me get a little pointer. This little area in here, let's see if I'm in frame, yep. Right in here, just along here, is where I want to apply a very thin film of grease. Just in that area, that's all, just in here, nowhere else, all right? So that's what I'm going to do while I'm holding this, well, actually I need to get a little bit of white lithium grease just on the tip of this brush. That's all, just just a little bit. You just don't want to bog down these mechanisms, okay? It's really important to understand that. So I'm going to pull this down, and I'm just going to trace along here around the edge. And that's all, just a smear, because I'm just trying to aid this. I'm not trying to bog it down. And also too, over time, when this, let me put a little bit down here, just a smear, just a film. When this grease does start breaking down over time in the years to come, this is why these mechanisms need to be serviced periodically. They were intended to be serviced periodically. These were made to be serviced, not like today where you throw crap away. But anyways, when the lubricant does start to degrade and kind of go away, if you have a lot of it just globbed in there, then it will become, again, like I've said before about degraded grease, it will become thick, it will become viscous, it'll get sticky, and it will act more as an adhesive rather than a lubricant. But if I just start out with a nice thin smear, as it starts to age, the likelihood of what's going to happen is this. It's just going to go away, okay? So a lot of greases, white lithium grease included, when it gets kind of degraded, if you don't have too much globbed in there, it just has a tendency to kind of dry out, for lack of a better term. It gets kind of flaky where it'll just kind of flake off the surface, and you're better off having it do that and just have really no lubrication left at all than to have a big glob of degraded lubrication left over. You know, you're obviously catching my drift there. So just a small little bit will go a long way, because while the lubricant is good and it's fresh, over the years that it remains that way, then it's going to assist the movement of the parts that you apply it to, okay? And yeah, if you apply some thicker stuff, you know, it'll probably work for a while, but again, when it gets degraded, that's a different story. So I want you to understand the point as to why I say this and I say that. That's why I give these long explanations, so that it really drives home in the minds of the people that I'm trying to teach why you're doing it and why you only want to use a little smear, as opposed to, well, isn't applying more better? Well, no, it's not. Not in these situations anyways. So I'm going to flip it over now. Let me make sure I'm in frame. And on the back side here of this drive release lever, okay, same thing down in here. Let me see. Yeah, it's in frame. Okay, so down in here, I don't want to apply a lot of lubricant. Yeah, I got to hold this up a little bit so that the intermediate drive gear doesn't get hung up. So under here, same thing. I just want to apply a very thin sheen of grease in this area. Okay, you don't really need a lot at all, just a thin sheen where you see, again, the working surfaces happening here, just to the working surfaces of the lever, all right? And just a little thin film, because if you put too much, again, when it degrades, not going to be good, all right? So there you go. So let me go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. I'm not going to sit here on camera doing this part, but just study the working surfaces and just a very thin film of white lithium grease. That's it. Okay, so I'll just point it out real quick. So just around here, I put a very thin edge, just around the edge, a very thin edge, little film of white lithium grease. A little bit more over here on this side, because you see the way this lever is moving. You see what it does? You see this action here? All right, hopefully I'm in frame. Yep, you see that action? How this section of the lever runs over to that side. And it does it kind of quick too, okay? So I'm just aiding that with a little thin bead of grease. In fact, I'm going to clean a little bit off, and I will often do that. I'll go through after I apply grease, and I'll kind of clean it up just a little bit in areas where I think it's a little too thick, like that, just that. So that's perfect now, okay? It's nice and thin. So I have it around the edge over here, just around here, a little bit down in here, just a smear, and most of it is in this section here, and there's a little bit under this edge, just a tiny bit. But you can see I just put a really thin film, and that's going to help things along just fine. So another area, now you can see that, let me get back in frame here. Yeah, I'm looking at the screen of the camera there. So another area where this little area here, this little base of this this little shaft here, the base of the shaft, it runs along this edge here, okay? And it hits it pretty hard. The base, you know, when it rounds that corner there, see it rounding that corner? It slams that corner area kind of hard there, okay? So that's a hard contact point, a working surface. So I'm going to get a little dab of the lithium grease on there. And again, notice I'm just putting a little tiny dot of lithium grease just in that inside edge there. All right. I could even apply a little bit around the bottom of the base there. Okay, that's fine. And on the edge. All right. So that when it does that little action there, you know, it kind of aids the travel there, okay? Let me hold this steady. All right, there's that little surface there that I'm trying to aid. All right, so that's all good. So I feel good with that. I didn't over apply anything, and that's how you kind of have to think when you're doing this stuff. Less is more, unless you're dealing with a mechanism that requires a large application of grease for like damping reasons, or it's a very, very brute force lever and you need a thicker bed of grease underneath it to aid movement, wear and tear, to prevent wear and tear and all that. But otherwise, less is more, and you just want to apply it to the working surfaces as needed, where needed, in the correct amounts, okay? So that's the name of the game here. All right, so we're looking good. So let me go ahead and move on. Okay, now I'm going to get the striker arm on, and I'm going to, you see the hole at the end of the striker arm here, all right? That just drops down on this shaft here, or excuse me, not this one here, on this little copper little disc here. There's a little shaft extending up from it. Just going to drop this down in here and make sure that the striker arm, let me get that on here, make sure that the striker arm is resting between these two posts right here, okay? All right, let me get the clip. Actually, it's still in the... All right, so I'm just going to situate this here, excuse me, and get the clip back on. Oops, come on, get in there, stay. All right, is that clip going to stay on there? I think it needs to be pinched a little bit. I think this clip is a little bit overstretched, but yeah, it's not going to stay on. Let me, but you get the point. So what I'm going to do off camera real quick, I'm just going to close up this circlip a little bit. It's kind of a little overstretched. I'm going to close it up a little bit and then slap the clip on. Yeah, so you get the point. You see how this all goes together. All right, so now I want to get the tone arm assembly back in place. And as far as lubrication goes here, not too much. The only thing that I'm going to do is the so anyways, the tone arm base consists of the tone arm pivot tube, which runs through the base, and the pivot nut. You have your clutch assembly here, and the lift spindle, which is what I'm holding here. Okay, so the lift spindle is obviously going to end up going through the bottom. Once I get the the tone arm base mounted in place, and I'll get the lift spindle or lift shaft, whatever you want to call it, back in place. And the only thing I'm going to do is put a very light glaze of oil, no grease. I'm going to use that very thin, clean Singer sewing machine oil, and I'm just going to literally just put a film on it, just a light film, and run it up through the tube. This is not something that you want to grease up or anything like that, because again, you don't want it to start getting sticky and having issues with lifting the tone arm and lowering the tone arm and all that stuff. You don't want it to get stuck in the pivot tube, in other words. So a little bit of that really thin, light and clean oil is okay. Just again, a very thin sheen. And other than that, yeah, we're good to go. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm just going to get it situated. There's a couple of holes here, and you can see on the bottom of the base, all right, if I'm in frame, you see a screw hole here and here, and it just kind of mounts in place. So let me go ahead and get that done, and I will be right back. I'm just going to put a little smear of oil on here, and that's about it. Once I get it mounted in place, because I need to pay attention and have both of my hands, and I got to fiddle around with some stuff. So after I get it assembled, I'll kind of point out what it is that I did. It's very straightforward. So let me go ahead and get to it. Okay, so as you can see, the tone arm base, tone arm assembly is reinstalled on this subplate here. Now, one of the reasons I didn't want to try filming it while I was reassembling it, because in order for that to be of any use, you'd want to see me reinstalling things up close. But if I have it zoomed in up close like I do now, or fairly close, then I have to worry about, falling out of frame and all that. Now, the thing about falling out of frame, it's easy to do in this situation because I have to keep both of these pieces in alignment on the plate, okay? On this side of the plate, this side of the plate, they have to be in alignment because they utilize the same, the same screws, obviously, same holes. So you can see at the bottom of this support bracket, and the support bracket supports / guides the the elevation levers that, well, lower and raise the lift spindle, the tone arm lift spindle here, okay? So that's what's going on here. But anyways, again, the support bracket and the tone arm base, they have to be in alignment over the holes, and then you drop these screws down in here, this screw and this screw over here, and you got to hold these together, keep things in alignment, get them screwed in, of course. And for me anyways, I didn't want to sit there and try to keep the camera zoomed in close enough so that the filming of the process procedure is useful to you guys, and try to stay in frame and all that. And if I would have zoomed out, well, then I would have been zoomed out probably too far for it to be all that beneficial anyways. So it was better for me just to explain it after it was done, as I just did. So you definitely get the point of how that's done. Okay, good. So there we go. Okay, and we're just about wrapping things up here. The next thing I need to do is mount the main cam gear on the cam spindle or shaft, the main cam spindle, shaft, whatever. Okay, so I am going to get some things lubricated with an application, just a modest, not too light, not too heavy, just a modest application of white lithium grease on the main cam spindle here, okay? And also I'm going to apply a little bit in the hub, the main cam hub. And let me go ahead and move this subplate assembly out of the way. You already know I'm going to smear some grease on here, and let me go ahead and get the gear into view. Okay, so on the bottom of the main cam gear, I'm going to start by, well, I want to grease this roller bearing pin under here fairly heavy, and for the purpose of holding that bearing in place. while I, you know, flip it over and mount it on the plate. So I want it a little bit more sticky there to, like I said, hold this roller bearing. So let me do that. Get enough grease in there to hold it down. All right. All right. So let me stick this bearing on. And then I want to smear a modest amount on these elevation changes. All right, this little track here, and there's different elevations on here. And I'm not going to get into a lot of detail of why that is. I just want to get this re-lubricated and get on with things. But these elevations, just in short, the short version are responsible for raising those, lowering and raising those elevation levers that in turn, lower and raise the tone arm lift spindle. Okay, so that's what's going on here when the main cam is rotating. Okay, that's the gist of it. So we're looking pretty good. I got a good amount of grease under here. I might put it just a little bit more, kind of even it out a little bit. All right, so that's looking pretty good. All right, now I'm going to get this main cam mounted back on the plate. Okay, and real quick, I almost forgot on this side here. I did mention that I was going to smear a little bit of lithium grease on the main cam spindle, but also too, in this area here, just around the edge of the record dropping slide, or at least this portion of the record dropping slide on the top here. This is a little bit more of a brute force mechanism, so I'm just going to put a modest smear around the edge here of the white lithium grease. All right, so let me do that. All right, so I'm just going to here and over here. All right. Let me all right. So that's good. Okay, I got the main cam installed, as you can see, and the bottom of the plate, in that same area but on the top side there, where the main cam is mounted, I had put a smear of grease along the edges where the record dropping slide contacts, its working surfaces. So same thing on this side too. I just put a little smear of grease here and here on this side. And then also too, let me see if it's going to drop the exposure too much. But I'm going to smear some grease around the working surfaces here, because again, this slide here slides along these areas too. It kind of slides back and forth and all that. So I'm just going to smear a little grease in here. All right, so. Again, that's good right there. It doesn't have to be a ton, just a modest amount, whatever. Like I said, that's a pretty brute force mechanism, the way it slides along, and yeah, so that's good. So that's about it for this plate, for the most part. I might put a little drop of oil at this little pivot point where these elevation levers are situated and all that. I might put just a little drop right here where they pivot. Their pivot points, just of that Singer sewing machine oil, and literally just a little drop. So as you can see, I think the takeaway from all of this, you kind of saw the main lubrication points and the fact that I don't over lubricate, and when I apply lubrication, it's done in a very clean manner. I don't smear it all over the place. It's really not necessary. There's some areas, like on the bottom side of the turntable chassis, where those big control levers are situated and, you know, operating and all that, and they have longer ranges of travel and more brute force sliding activity taking place. I applied more grease there at those points, but really on this main plate, or, you know, subplate assembly, whatever, you don't need to apply a whole bunch of lubricant. And yeah, that's about the long and short of it. So everything's looking good otherwise. Let me flip this back around, because there's one more thing that I will point out. Let me spin this around and situate it in such a way where, yeah, I think the exposure is probably okay there. It's not too glaring, and it's not dropping the exposure too much. I'll also apply just a light smear of grease, fairly light, in these tracks here, okay? I'll go along and just in these tracks, you know, I'll put a little light smear of grease, because you have this lever here and the index pin that tracks in some of those grooves. I'm not going to explain the whole process, but you get the point. There's this lever and an index pin on the bottom, and it rides in some of these grooves, and so I'll just get a light smear of grease in some of these grooves here. Again, light. I don't want to go real heavy on it. No need for that, and good enough. All right, so that's that. Okay, so here we are, and I decided to slap the mechanism back in. It's really fast to do. It's not a big deal. There's what, about 5 screws to mount the mechanism back in. Pop the tires back on, the wheels back on, and that's really it. Not a big deal at all. So I wanted to do that just to perform some basic function tests. And I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that for you guys in just a moment here. But before I do that, let me just mention a few things. First of all, that's pretty much, after the function testing in this video, that's pretty much where I'm going to stop. And the reason why, well, there's a couple reasons. Number one, I don't want the video to get much longer than this video, because, yeah, it's just going to get too long, and I don't want to do that. So also too, I feel that I've covered some good fundamentals in this video, and especially going through and reassembling the mechanism and pointing out some fundamentals as far as reapplying lubricants and talking a bit about that. And along the way, of course, I was doing some reassembly. I pointed out some aspects of the more critical reassembly phases and what have you. So that's pretty good. And, I covered some other stuff in here as well, toward the beginning and all that. And yeah. So anyways, I think this was a pretty good video as far as a few tips on various things. So next reason is because I've got 2 more Micromatics behind this one here. One of them, which is going to be another full restoration, and then the other one, it needs some repair work, and we'll see how deep I get into the second one. But one of them for sure is going to be a full restoration. So, 2 Micromatics behind this one. Yeah, I'm all Micromatic'd out. And anyways, so let me go ahead and get into some function testing. So first of all, I'll just point out a few quick things. So this is a new idler here. Yeah, everything's, like I said, as you know, has been gone through. Re-lubricated. I cleaned inside the platter well here real nice. I cleaned the chassis top and bottom. Everything looks really, really nice. So yeah, anyways, let me go ahead and start some function testing. Oh, also too, yeah, I did, of course, clean and re-grease, pack new grease in the bearings and the platter bearing here. Everything is real nice. So this baby is going to perform really, really, really good. And also too, the only other things I have to do, by the way, is just reinstall the record dropping arm, and on the bottom the muting switch. But the muting switch, I just want to clean the contacts on it and get that reinstalled. That's very easy to do. So piece of cake. It's pretty evident how to do that. And then while I'm doing that, of course, I'm going to solder in the tone arm wiring. and it'll be ready for audio testing, of course. Now, as I may have mentioned, I think I did anyways, I'm going to do one more video, just a quick audio / performance test, some record dropping, LPs, 45s, and of course some audio testing. But as you know, with the audio testing, I can only do some test vinyl that has some test tones on it. I'm mainly doing that for the customer so that he can hear that, yeah, this thing is producing sound. Okay, so not a big deal. Some of you, that's not too interesting, but for him it probably will be, because he'll hear it, making sound and playing some test tones. I can't do music because of the whole copyright thing. You know how that goes. But that's all I have to do. Record dropping arm, muting switch, get the tone arm wiring soldered back in, and pretty much this baby's going to be ready to go. Otherwise, yeah, let me get the platter back on. Just gonna drop this down. I'm gonna leave the clip off because, whatever. I have a few more little things to do. So I've cleaned up the rubber real nice, and yeah, this thing came out really good as I bumped the tripod. And I added a little bit of oil to the platter hub, and yeah, it rotates smooth as butter. So anyways, let me go ahead and reposition the camera a little bit so I can squeeze in here, and then I'll go over some basic function testing. Okay, so let's go ahead and test out a few things here. Of course, the tone arm lifting, so the cycling, of course, tone arm lifting, and sizing up the vinyl, tapping the edge, and then dropping the vinyl. Of course, I have to keep my 2 fingers here like this because I am the record dropping arm because I don't have it installed yet. So there you go. So let me go ahead and start it up. Okay, I have it, platter's rotating, and then let me go ahead and cycle it here. I'm reaching over to the switch to kick it over to auto. You'll see the tone arm lift, tap the edge of the vinyl, and then drop it. Okay, and of course it'll set down. Okay, and boom, you see it's going to set down right perfect at the lead-in groove. So everything is dialed in really nice. Now let me go ahead and walk it across, and we'll check the end of play, auto return. Okay, there it is. And now it's going to go back to its rest position and shut off. Okay? And everything is really nice there. I'll probably have to tweak around. There's an adjustment for the auto return and auto set down, auto return, and all that stuff. I might tweak that around a little bit, but it actually looked pretty good when I was carrying it over. I think it's fine as is. I know that it's set down right where it needs to on the lead-in groove, and yeah, I actually think it's fine the way it is. But I might have to tweak it a little bit. I don't know. We'll see when the time comes. But otherwise, let me go ahead and try the 45 adapter here and a 45 and see how the tone arm sizes up a 45 and drops it and all that. Let me do that right now. Get set up for it. Okay, so before I test with a 45. I just want to mention that I'm not going to be able to use the 45 adapter, unfortunately. Now this was a 45 adapter that came to me with the unit, but it's not the right length adapter. The spindle is a little bit taller than the adapter, and of course the adapter has to, yeah, even if I extend it, even if I bring this up a little bit, the 45 adapter, the bottom of it here has to sit flush, of course, pretty flush with the top of the the platter mat, okay, the top of the platter. So it has to sit pretty flush there. There can't be a big gap, or else obviously it's not going to hold the 45 centered. So yeah, this one is just too short. And I was checking some of the other Imperial Micromatics here that I have on the bench over there that I'm going to be working on, as I mentioned. And it's the same thing. The spindles on the other Imperials seem to be a little bit on the longer side in reference to this adapter. So anyways, I'm not really a Micromatic, Magnavox Micromatic spindle 45 adapter expert. I know there's different spindles and adapters out there, probably combinations, whatnot. And some of you may know more about the various spindles and adapters that are available. But usually when I get them in with the adapters that just work with the unit, that fit the spindle. There's been a few cases where I've had to do some repair work on the adapters and open them up, and because they're just not functioning properly, the tabs aren't operating properly, and I have to go in and kind of clean them up and so forth and get them working. And other than that though, as far as like I just said, usually the adapter that comes to me with the unit is the right one for the spindle. So whatever. So I'll leave that up to the customer to figure out. If he wants to try to hunt down another adapter and see if it works, maybe try to find one that's a little bit longer, that was made for the longer spindle. If that's the case, then fine. Or I don't know, whatever. Because I don't really have time to go into that on this. I've done a lot of work on this already, and I've got other turntables I have to get to, and other equipment and amps and this and that. So, and I'm just bogged down with work, so I don't want to spend too much time farting around with the spindle and trying to get it to work. And the reason why, or not the spindle, the adapter, excuse me. And the reason why is because just that, the spindle is fine. It's not the spindle that's causing the problem. The spindle is operating as it should. The the lever here, the spindle lever, the little push-off lever there, dropping lever, is working just fine. It's functioning like it should. So that's why I don't want to spend a lot of time screwing around with adapters and spindle combinations and all that. So anyways, on that note, if you're not too worried about it, just keep the 45 adapter on board just for aesthetics if you want, and use some of these little yellow adapters here that you just pop right in the center. And like I said, the spindle is working fine as far as record dropping is concerned, and I'm going to demonstrate that. So anyways, again, my fingers are acting as the record dropping arm because as I mentioned a moment ago, I don't have it installed yet. So let me go ahead and start this up. And you'll see that the tone arm will lift, tap the side, size it up, and then drop it. Okay. Okay, dropped it, and then it'll set, and then the set down is right on the lead-in groove like it should be. I have the stylus guard on the cartridge right now, so that's why I'm not letting it drop. And then I'm going to walk it over to the lead-out groove, end of play, and we'll see it auto-return like it should, set down, and then shut off. It's sizing up to see if there's another piece of vinyl. There's not, so it went back, and bam, it shut off. So this thing is cycling, functioning just fine. The spindle is doing just fine as far as record dropping is concerned. It's just this. It's too short. And I also think there's something wrong internally inside this adapter, because it doesn't even go down very far at all. It should go down a little bit further than it does, even though it's still too short. But it should go down a little bit more. It gets hung up right away. It's like there's something damaged internally. I really don't know. And like I said, I don't have the time to pull it apart right now and spend a lot of time tweaking around with it. I'm not going to worry about that, especially being that there's workarounds. Like I said, just get these little adapters here, and you can stack 45s until your heart's content, and drop them and drop them and drop them and all that jazz. So there you go. So anyways, like I said, I'll be back with another very short video, just doing some audio testing with some, test vinyl with test tones, and do a little bit more performance testing with the stylus guard off, and, again, the tone arm wiring soldered to the muting switch and all connected and ready to go. That'll be the last thing I do, and that's going to be a really short video. So those of you that stuck it out for this video, I appreciate that. So I'm going to end it here, guys. And as I always say, peace, love, music, and the vintage audio that brings it to your ears. Till next time, y'all take care. This has been a Spinning Head production.